The trunk pops open at 1:47 in the morning on a stretch of Route 22 in New Jersey that nobody drives without a reason. Arlo Beaumont does not have a reason. He was just going home. He had pulled over because something shifted. Not a flat tire, not engine trouble, something inside his car, something that moved, something that breathed. He stood at the back of his 10-year-old Civic, with the hazard lights blinking orange into the dark and his hand on the latch for a full 30 seconds before he found the nerve to pull it. He pulls it. 3 men are folded into the trunk like the world ran out of space for them. Their wrists are bound with thick rope, looped and knotted at the center, and their shirts are torn. There is blood on the one in the middle, dark and dried at the shoulder of his black shirt, stiff where it has already set. There is a cut above the eye of the one on the far left that has swollen the entire left side of his face into something that barely resembles the face it used to be. The one on the right is the most still, not unconscious still, choosing to be still, eyes closed, jaw set, the kind of stillness that is not peace but endurance, and that distinction matters, and Arlo feels it the moment he looks at him. Hi viewers. If you were standing at this trunk right now at 1:47 in the morning on a dark highway with no one around, would you call the police, drive away, or help them yourself? Drop your answer in the comments right now, because what Arlo decides next is going to change the entire direction of his life. Arlo's chest locks. His throat does what it always does, which is nothing, because Arlo Beaumont has not made a sound with his mouth since he was 4 years old, and a fever took the voice from him and never gave it back. He is mute the way some people are left-handed. It is simply how he came into the world, and it is simply how he moves through it, with a battered notepad in his back pocket, and a phone with a notes app permanently open, and a pair of eyes that have always had to do the work that most people divide between their eyes and their mouth. Right now those eyes are doing the work of a man who is looking at something his brain has not yet agreed to process, because he knows these faces. Everybody in Essex County knows these faces. They are on the local news when the news runs out of other things to say. Their names are etched into granite on a courthouse donation plaque on Broad Street in downtown Newark, the letters deep and clean and permanent. The Voss triplets, Selim, Zane and Dorian Voss. 26 years old, all 3 of them, and between them they own enough of this city to make the people who are supposed to be running it walk carefully around the subject. The kind of men that regular people mention in lowered voices at the ends of sentences. The kind whose names carry a specific weight before the brain has finished registering the sound. They are also, right now, bound at the wrists and bleeding, and folded into the trunk of Arlo's 2014 Toyota Civic on the side of a highway at almost 2 in the morning. The one on the right, the still one, the one with the silver hair and a scar that runs from his left temple to the edge of his jaw like someone drew a line there once and meant it, opens his eyes. They are pale blue, almost colorless, like water over gray stone, and they cut straight through the dark and straight through the 12 inches of air between them and land directly on Arlo's face. Not in the general direction of his face. On it. With the precise focus of someone who was looking for a specific thing and has found exactly that thing and nothing else in the world is relevant right now, Arlo's fingers tighten on the edge of the trunk. He does not step back. He does not step forward. He stands in the orange pulse of his hazard lights and holds very still while his heart does something unsteady and irregular behind his sternum. The man Selim, the oldest, the one the news always photographs first, opens his cracked, dry lips. He says a name. He says Arlo, not hey, not help, not please, just Arlo, spoken quietly and without question, not like a guess, like a confirmation of something he already knew. Like a man who has been carrying a name around in his pocket for a long time and has finally had a reason to take it out. Arlo does not move. The hazard lights blink. Once, twice, 3 times. The night sits heavy and warm around them, and somewhere down the highway, a semi moves through the dark and its headlights sweep the road and vanish. The dark-haired one in the middle, the one with the dried blood on his shoulder, turns his head with visible effort and looks at his brother and says through a split lip, his voice rough and low, he's going to run. Blonde one on the far left, the one with the swollen face and the golden eyes that are open now and staring at the sky above the trunk like he is too tired to look at anything closer, says without moving, without inflection, without the smallest adjustment in his posture, he won't. And the thing about that statement, the thing that pulls at the edges of Arlo's chest in a way he does not have a word for, is that it is said with certainty. Not hope, not instruction, not threat, certainty. The kind that does not need to perform itself. And Dorian is right, Arlo does not run. He stands there for 3 more seconds with the hazard lights blinking and the night pressing in on all sides and 3 bound men watching him from inside his own trunk. Then he reaches into his back pocket and pulls out his notepad and his pen, and in the orange and dark, he writes one line and holds it up toward the pale blue eyes that are still watching him. It says, "Can you move?" Selim reads it. The corner of his mouth shifts barely, the outline of something. He says, "Yes." Arlo puts the notepad back. He looks at all 3 of them once more, long and level, the way he looks at everything when he is deciding. Then he reaches back into the trunk and he begins to get them out. He gets them out one at a time, and it is not graceful and nobody pretends it is. Selim first, because Selim was already half sitting and met Arlo halfway, hooking his bound wrists over Arlo's shoulder and pulling himself to the edge while Arlo took the weight. He clears the trunk without making a sound, lands on his feet and stands. He does not sway. Arlo watches him not sway and understands that this man has decided, somewhere between whatever happened to him and right now, that he will not let his body show more than it has to. Zayn is heavier and the shoulder wound pulls when he lifts, and Arlo watches his face for the flinch and catches it, one quick contraction at the left side of his jaw, before Zayn locks it down and buries it somewhere behind his eyes. He gets out without asking for more help than Arlo has already offered. Dorian climbs out on his own. Slowly, carefully, with the deliberate movements of someone who finds it genuinely insulting to need assistance, and will do without it before he will accept it without choosing to. Arlo notices he does not use his left hand at all, braces himself with the right, rotates on the right, keeps the left tucked in close to his body. Something is wrong with it. Dorian does not mention this. Arlo does not ask. He opens the back door. They get in, he drives, nobody speaks. Arlo cannot speak. The Kings, for reasons of their own, choose not to fill the silence, and somewhere between the Union Interchange and the Montclair exit, Arlo becomes aware that this is the first time in his memory that silence in a car has felt like something shared rather than something he is carrying alone. His apartment is on the 3rd floor of a building with a front door that has to be lifted slightly while you turn the key, a hallway that smells like garlic from 3B at nearly every hour of the day, and a 3rd floor landing where one of the light bulbs has been flickering for 6 weeks, and the building manager has been saying he'll fix it for just as long. It is not the kind of place the Voss triplets have ever walked through. The kind of hallways they walk through have marble floors and doormen who know better than to make eye contact. But they walk through his hallway without looking around the way wealthy people look around humble spaces, that slow inventory of everything that isn't enough, and Arlo notices that and keeps it. He points at the couch. Selim and Dorian sit. Zayn lowers himself to the floor with his back against the wall below the window, which Arlo reads immediately. He does not want the wound touching the couch back. Arlo goes to the bathroom before Zayn has to ask. The first aid kit is under the sink, the real one, not the toy one with the 4 bandages and the antiseptic wipe that barely covers a finger. He keeps it stocked because he used to volunteer Thursday evenings at a free clinic near Branch Brook Park, and old habits do not leave you just because the Thursday evenings do. He carries it back to the living room, sets it open on the floor next to Zayn and kneels. The shoulder wound is deep but clean, the edges straight. Whatever made it was sharp and used with intention. Arlo cleans it without expression, and without comment, and Zayn watches his hands the entire time. Not his face, not the kit, not the window, just the hands. The way someone watches something they are trying to hold on to. When Arlo tapes the bandage flat and sits back on his heels, Zayn says, his voice rough and quiet and not entirely steady, "You're good at that." Arlo pulls out his phone. Types, "I used to help at a free clinic in Newark on Thursdays." He holds it up. Zayn reads it. Something moves in his amber eyes, some quick internal recalibration. "In Newark," he repeats, and the way he says the city's name it is like the city just got 3 sizes smaller. Arlo puts the kit away. He goes to the kitchen and fills 3 glasses of water and carries them back and sets them on the coffee table without ceremony. Dorian picks his up with his right hand, just the right, and drinks half of it in one long pull, and then stares at the glass with the expression of someone surprised to be grateful for something this ordinary. Arlo settles into the armchair across from them. He pulls out his notepad and uncaps his pen and writes one question and holds it up. "Who did this to you?" Selim and Zayn look at each other. The look is 2 seconds long. In the language of brothers who have been brothers for 26 years, 2 seconds is a full paragraph, Dorian answers. He sets his glass on the table carefully, precisely like a man who controls the things he can control. He looks at Arlo with his flat gold eyes and says, with the specific calm of someone who has already processed their own shock and is now simply reporting from the other side of it, "We weren't taken by an enemy." He pauses. The refrigerator hums. Below them, a door closes on a lower floor. "We were put in that trunk by someone who shares our last name." Arlo sits with that. He writes one word, who Dorian's jaw tightens. He looks at Selim. Selim looks at Zayn. Neither of them moves toward the answer. "Tonight," Selim says. His voice is careful, not evasive, careful. The difference matters. He is not hiding the answer. He is protecting something around the edges of it, something that is not ready yet to be handed across a coffee table to a stranger in a Montclair apartment. He looks at Arlo when he says it. Those silver blue eyes steady on him, patient, asking without asking for a kind of trust that has not been earned yet but is being asked for anyway. Arlo looks back at him for a long moment. Then he caps his pen and puts the notepad away. He gets up, goes to the linen closet, and drops a folded blanket on the end of the couch without a word. He goes to bed. He does not sleep for a long time. He lies in the dark and looks at the ceiling and listens to the sounds of his apartment with 3 extra people in it and tries to understand what exactly he has just done. He does not arrive at a satisfying answer. He falls asleep anyway. Morning comes the way it always does in Montclair, slow and grey, and without apology. Arlo is up before anyone else. He moves through his apartment with the practiced quiet of someone who has been moving through quiet spaces his whole life, stepping over the third floorboard from the bathroom door on the left side where it creaks, knowing the coffee maker runs 40 seconds longer than the display claims, and not rushing it. He fills the reservoir. He measures the grounds. He watches the first thin stream of coffee hit the bottom of the carafe and holds both hands loosely around his mug and just breathes. He does not look at the living room for the first 2 minutes. He makes himself finish making the coffee first. When he looks, the three of them are wrong in his space in a way that is both obvious and strangely specific. The couch fits 2 people comfortably, and Selim is somehow taking only his half of it, sitting upright, forearms on his knees, still dressed from last night. He does not look like a man who slept. He looks like a man who waited for morning, because morning was the next thing on the list and he was not going to miss it. Dorian is on the floor now, back against the front of the couch, a throw pillow behind his head that he removed from the couch at some point in the night without asking, and he is asleep in a way that looks almost combative, like he fought the tiredness, and the tiredness won on points but not by submission. Zayn is in the armchair. Arlo's armchair, the one with the worn-out right armrest where Arlo has rested his elbow every evening for 2 years. Zayn's eyes are open. They have been open for a while. Arlo fills 3 mugs. His is the chipped one, the blue one with the handle crack, the one he bought at a flea market in Hoboken 3 years ago for 75 cents. It has always been the chipped one. He puts the 3 mugs in a line on the counter and looks at them, and then carries the first one to Selim. He sets it on the coffee table near Selim's knee without looking at him. The way you put something near something you are still making up your mind about. Selim picks it up with both hands and brings it to his face and breathes in the steam before he drinks. And in that single, unguarded moment, he looks so completely ordinary, so far from everything that his name suggests, that Arlo has to look somewhere else fast, because that small human detail does something it should not be able to do. He wakes Dorian by setting the second mug on the floor beside him. Dorian opens his eyes and looks at the mug and then up at Arlo and says nothing, which Arlo is already beginning to understand is just Dorian's version of saying thank you. The language of men who were taught that gratitude should be felt privately. He carries the third cup to Zayn. Zayn takes it with both hands and immediately taps the rim twice with his index finger. A short, quick rhythm. Tap, tap, like a reflex that fired before he could catch it, and then he stops. His hand goes still on the mug. He is aware that Arlo saw it. Arlo goes back to the kitchen. He leans against the counter and drinks his own coffee and looks out the window at the grey alley and the single telephone wire with one bird sitting on it, like the last punctuation mark in a very long sentence. He does not hear Selim get up. He turns and Selim is standing at the entrance to the kitchen, and in his hands, held flat, both palms open, the way you carry something you picked up off the floor and are not sure yet belongs to you, is Arlo's journal. Arlo goes still. It is not a secret. He keeps it on the bookshelf next to the kitchen because that is where it lives, where it has always lived, plainly visible, just never touched. It is private the way certain things are private, not locked, not hidden, just understood. The hydrangea pressed between pages 14 and 15, flat and pale blue now, placed there 2 years ago on an afternoon at Branch Brook Park on a day that still sits behind his eyes sometimes. The sentences that fill 3/4 of the pages, observations and fragments and things, Arlo needs to put somewhere when there is nowhere else for them to go. His voice in the only form it has ever taken. He holds out his hand. Selim does not give it back, not right away. He looks down at it and then he walks to Arlo's kitchen table and sits down in the chair across from where Arlo was standing, and he opens it to the first page and he reads. Arlo should stop him. He takes 1 step toward the table and then stops himself because something about the way Selim is reading arrests him. Not skimming, not the polite glance and return that people give to things that are not theirs. Reading, each sentence, each line. The way you read something when the words are landing on you and you are letting them. He reads 3 full pages. He does not rush. When he turns the second page, his expression changes in a way that is too small to name but too clear to miss, a softening, not of his face but of something behind it. He closes the journal. He sets it flat on the table and rests both palms on the cover, and he looks up at Arlo, and in his expression is something Arlo has not seen on a person's face when they look at him in a very long time. Not pity, not curiosity, recognition. The specific, quiet kind that says, I understand what this is and I am not going to make you explain it. He slides the journal gently back across the table. From the living room, Zayn says, his voice low and changed from a moment ago, carrying something in it that was not there before. Arlo. Arlo turns. Zayn is standing at the open closet near the hallway. He is not looking through it. That is not the kind of person he is. Arlo already knows this 24 hours in. He had been reaching for the blanket on the upper shelf, the spare one Arlo had not thought to offer last night, and what his hand found instead was tucked behind it. He is holding a photograph, a 4-inch print, slightly faded at the corners, warm-toned and bright like all outdoor photos from a decade ago. Four teenagers standing against a chain-link fence on a school basketball court, squinting slightly into the sun. Three of them are recognizable even at 17, silver-haired, dark-haired, blonde, taller than the court behind them, laughing at something just outside the frame. The fourth is smaller, brown-haired, standing slightly to the side of the group with his hands in his jacket pockets. He is smiling. It is not a performance of a smile. It is the real kind. Zane looks from the photograph to Arlo. His amber eyes are doing something that Arlo cannot afford to look at directly. "This is you," Zane says. It is not a question. He has already confirmed it. He looks back at the photograph. "And this is us." Coffee in Arlo's mug is still warm. The bird on the telephone wire outside is still there. The morning continues doing what mornings do, unbothered, and the kitchen feels suddenly like a room where something large has just been placed in the center of the floor, with no instructions for what to do next. The photograph sits on the kitchen table, and nobody reaches for it. They are all in the kitchen now, Selim at the table, Zane leaning against the counter with his arms crossed but not closed, Dorian standing in the doorway with his coffee mug and his undisclosable left hand, and the photograph is there between them like an opened letter that everyone has already read, but nobody has commented on yet. Arlo looks at it for a long time. Long enough that Zane shifts his weight once and Dorian stops pretending to look at the window. Arlo is not avoiding the question. He is organizing himself. He has had to do this his entire life, gather himself before the world moves faster than he can answer, not because he is slow but because his answers have always required more intention than other people's. You cannot throw words out carelessly when each one costs you ink and paper and the moment it takes to deliver. He reaches for his notepad. He writes carefully, the way he writes everything, and he holds it up. "We went to the same school for 6 months when I was 15. You were juniors, I was a freshman. None of you remembered me." He watches them read it. Zane goes quiet in the way that large rooms go quiet when every source of sound is removed at once, total, sudden, and weighted with its own pressure. He looks at the photograph again, at the fourth figure in it, and then back at Arlo, and what moves through his amber eyes is something Arlo recognizes from the inside out. The specific look of a man realizing he let something pass him by without knowing what it was, only understanding the loss later, long after the moment has already closed. Dorian turns away. He moves to the window and puts his back to the room with both hands in his pockets, the right hand and the still hidden left, and the set of his shoulders does not say anger. It says discomfort, not with Arlo, with himself. There is a difference and Arlo reads it clearly. Selim sits very still. Not the stillness of absence, the stillness of depth. He is not retreating. He is going somewhere inside himself where he goes when the surface information is not enough and he needs to turn the thing over and look at what is underneath it. When he comes back from that place, he has something to say that counts. He picks up Arlo's notepad from the table. He does it with the ease of someone who has quietly decided at some point in the last several hours that formalities between them are no longer the point. He writes. He slides it back. "I remembered you." Arlo reads it. Reads it again. His eyes track back to the beginning of those 3 words to make sure he read them right. Selim has already picked the notepad back up. He writes more. Arlo watches the pen move across the paper and says nothing because he cannot say anything, and in this moment that fact does not frustrate him the way it sometimes does, it just is, and the room holds it without requiring him to apologize for it. The notepad comes back. "I did not know your name at the time. I only knew what I saw. You sat at the water fountain outside the gym every day at lunch, the quietest spot in the building. You always had a book. One day in the stairwell I dropped mine on the way between floors and you picked it up without being asked and handed it back to me, and you looked at me like I was a person and not a title, and I never let go of that. I just never knew there was a name on the other side of it until right now." Arlo stares at the notepad for a long time. The words sit in front of him and he does not pick the paper up. He does not need to move it closer to read it again because he has already read it twice, and the sentences are already somewhere they are not going to leave. He was 15 and invisible, and sitting at a water fountain with a book in a school he was only enrolled in for 1 semester because they moved 3 times that year, and apparently while he was being invisible, he was also being seen. He does not know what to do with this information. He is not sure there is a correct thing to do with information like this. The math of it is too strange, the boy who sat alone because it was easier than trying to communicate in a world that ran on words he couldn't speak, now sitting in his own kitchen across from the 3 people he used to watch from exactly far enough away that it didn't cost him anything. He pulls the notepad back. He writes, "Why are you telling me this now?" Selim reads it. The corner of his mouth shifts, the shape of something that is not quite a smile but is related to one. He writes back, "Because 10 years ago I didn't have the courage. I'm not going to waste the second chance." Before Arlo can respond to that, Dorian's voice cuts from the window, flattened to something precise and operational. "Selim." Calum looks up, black SUV. Dorian does not turn around. "No plates. It's been past this block 3 times in the last hour." Kitchen temperature doesn't change, but something in the room does. Selim stands. Zane moves to the wall beside the window, the far side, out of the sightline from the street. Dorian steps back from the glass without stepping away from it. They move like a system, fast, quiet, and practiced in a way that does not need instruction, each one knowing his position without being told. Arlo stands in the middle of his kitchen with the notepad in his hand and the photograph still on the table, and watches these three men shift into something different from what they were 10 seconds ago, and understands, for the first time since he pulled open that trunk last night, that the thing he brought into his apartment is not just three people who needed help, it is whatever comes after them. Arlo goes to the window. He stands on the far side of Dorian and looks down at the street below through the narrow gap between the curtain and the wall. The SUV is there, black, moving at the measured pace of something trying to look like it is not paying attention. It rolls past the building entrance, past the laundromat on the corner, and rounds the far end of the street and disappears. The sidewalk returns to normal immediately. A woman with a double stroller, a delivery driver unloading boxes from the back of a truck, a man in a grey hoodie walking a small dog that stops to investigate every vertical surface it passes. All of it exactly as it should be, which is exactly the problem. Because someone went to the trouble of making it look exactly as it should be, Arlo steps back from the window. He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out his burner phone, the one he keeps charged and silent out of a habit he never fully examined, and he looks at it. There is a message. It came in at 4:12 in the morning, 3 words, give them up. He reads it twice. His eyes go to Selim, then Zane, then Dorian, 3 men who are currently dismantling the safety of his apartment with their eyes without touching a single thing. He looks back at the screen. He presses delete. He pockets the phone. He does not tell them. He goes to the kitchen cabinet above the refrigerator, the high one he never uses for daily things, and he pulls out a spare set of keys. He types on his primary phone and holds it up for all 3 of them to read. I know somewhere we can go. My cousin Devonte has a house in Bloomfield. He is in Portugal until the end of next month. Nobody knows about that house except me. Selim reads it. He looks at Zane. He looks at Dorian. No one speaks. Selim nods once. The nod of a man who has already calculated the options and found that this one has the fewest problems, and that is the end of the discussion. By 9:15 they are out the door. By 9:40 they are in Bloomfield. Devonte's house is a narrow 2-story on a residential street that knows how to be quiet. Cedar and old paperback books, which is exactly what the inside smells like when Arlo unlocks the door and pushes it open. Clean but lived in, the kind of house where someone keeps the pantry stocked not out of preparedness but out of optimism. Arlo goes through the freezer and finds enough to pull together a meal without ceremony, and he heats it without being asked and sets it on the table, and nobody comments on the domesticity of any of this because they are all past the point of performing normalcy. They eat. Arlo cleans up. The Kings move through the new space in the careful, systematic way that tells Arlo everything about who they're away from press coverage and courthouse plaques, checking the back door, noting which windows face the street, standing in each room long enough to file it. Not paranoid, prepared. There is a difference, and it runs through everything they do. The days after that are the strangest of Arlo's life, not because of the danger, not because of the weight of what is slowly tightening around them, because of the small things. The things that happen in the silences between the larger things, in the margins of ordinary hours, where people are most true. Zane cannot stand silence with no rhythm in it. Arlo notices this by the second day, not because Zane announces it, but because Arlo notices everything, and what he notices is this. Zane taps. On countertops, on the arm of chairs, on his own knee when he forgets to self-correct. Short rhythms, clipped and specific, like he is keeping time with something only he can hear, like he needs to put sound somewhere in the room or the room becomes something else to him. Arlo files this away and does not mention it. On the 3rd afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table with both their hands resting near each other, Arlo taps once on the table surface with his knuckle. A short, simple beat. Exactly the rhythm Zane had been running. Zane stops mid-tap. He looks at Arlo. Arlo keeps his expression neutral and picks up his coffee. Something moves through Zane's face, quick, unguarded, too fast to name before it closes, and then he picks up his own coffee too, and neither of them says anything about it because there is nothing to say, and also because the thing that just passed between them communicated itself just fine without words. Dorian collects receipts. Not on his phone, not in an app. Physically, folded, pressed flat, carried in the inside of his wallet in a small tight stack. Arlo discovers this on the second morning, when Dorian sets his wallet on the bathroom counter before washing his face, and 2 of them slip out onto the tile. Arlo picks them up to hand back and catches before he can stop himself. The date on the top one 6 years ago, a diner in Trenton, and in the margin, written in ink in handwriting that is clearly not Dorian's, the single word birthday with a small star drawn beside it. Dorian takes them back with both hands, the right and the left, which means the left is healing, and he folds them back into the wallet with the patient, practiced care of someone archiving something that cannot be replaced. Arlo asks nothing. He understands the instinct to keep physical proof that you were somewhere good with someone who mattered enough to write in the margins. Selim does not sleep, Maury precisely. Selim sleeps the way a person sleeps when sleep is something they have made a tense, ongoing negotiation with. An hour here, A hard one 20 minutes there, always sitting upright, always positioned with his back to a wall and his line of sight on the door. On the second night, Arlo gets up at 2 in the morning for water and finds Selim at the kitchen table in the dark, palms flat on the table, eyes open, looking at nothing that is in the room. The expression on his face is one Arlo knows from the inside, the particular exhaustion of a person who has been carrying something large and heavy for so long that they can no longer feel the weight separately from themselves. It has become part of the architecture. Arlo gets 2 glasses of water. He sets one in front of Selim without making it a production. He pulls out the opposite chair and he sits, and they share the dark and the quiet and the sound of the house settling around them, and neither of them tries to turn it into a conversation. 4 days pass. On the 5th morning, Arlo is in the back room when he hears Dorian's voice from the living room, not the flat, contained tone of the first night, but something tighter. The tone of a sentence being controlled very deliberately because what it wants to do is not controlled. Arlo comes to the doorway. Dorian is standing in the center of the living room, and in his hand, his right hand, extended at his side, not raised, not pointed, just held, is Arlo's burner phone. Arlo's stomach drops cleanly and completely. The way a floor gives out, Dorian looks at him. His gold eyes are not angry. They are something more specific than angry. They are the eyes of a man who has just confirmed something he was hoping was not true, and is now choosing how to handle the fact that it is. You got a text on this phone 4 days ago, Dorian says. Each word placed. 3 words. Arlo does not move. You deleted it. Dorian turns the phone slightly in his hand, not looking at it, looking at Arlo. But the number is still in the log. A pause. I know that number. From the hallway, Zane steps into the room. From the kitchen, Selim appears. They are not rushing. They are not raising their voices. But the quality of the air in the room changes, a shift, immediate and total. And the 3 of them standing there are not the same 3 men who let Arlo make decisions about water glasses and sleeping arrangements. They are looking at him the way people look at someone they are afraid for not of. For person who sent that text, Dorian says very quietly now, the flatness stripped off and something rawer underneath, is our half-brother. His name is Nolan. Calum crosses to the armchair and sits down in a way that looks less like resting and more like a man bracing. His hands are on his knees, his eyes are on the middle distance. He has been working against us for months, Dorian continues. We thought it was about territory, the will, the split of our father's estate, money and power, the usual reasons people decide to put their family in a trunk. The last phrase lands without inflection, which makes it land harder. But if he is reaching out to you directly, he stops. Zane finishes it. He always finishes the sentence no one else wants to carry to the end. Then he knows who you are to us. He looks at Arlo, and he decided you were worth using. The house is perfectly quiet. Cedar and old paper, the rectangle of morning light on the hallway floor. Somewhere outside, a lawn mower starts up in the neighbor's yard, low and constant and completely indifferent to what is happening in this room. Arlo reaches for his notepad. He writes, "What does Nolan want with me?" Dorian takes the notepad. He reads it. He passes it to Selim. Selim reads it and sets it on the arm of the chair. "We don't fully know yet," Dorian says, "but Nolan does not reach out to anyone unless he already has a use for them." He looks at Arlo directly, and for the first time since the trunk, the composure in his expression has a crack in it, not wide, not breaking, just there, visible to someone who knows how to look for the things people are holding closed. Whatever he thinks you are to us, he is not wrong. Arlo looks at him. He looks at all 3 of them. Then he pulls the notepad back and uncaps his pen, and he is about to write something, and then his burner phone buzzes on the table. Everyone looks at it. Face up, screen lit. The number is the same. The text reads, "I see you moved them. Smart, but not smart enough." A pause, then 3 more words below the first line. "I'm already close." The phone is still lit on the table and nobody is moving toward it. That is the first thing Arlo registers, the stillness. You men who moved through this house like a system, who positioned themselves near exits and away from windows without being asked, are standing completely still and looking at a 4-inch screen like it said something that rearranged the floor beneath them. Then Selim picks it up. He reads both lines. His face does nothing. Not the nothing of a man who feels nothing, the nothing of a man who has learned, over the course of a life that required it, to let nothing show until he has decided what to show. He sets the phone back on the table face down, and when he looks up, he does not look at his brothers first. He looks at Arlo. He's bluffing about the location, Selim says. If he actually knew where we were, he wouldn't text, he'd move. He pauses, but he is close. He has been close since New York, or he wouldn't know you moved us. Zane is already at the window, 1 step to the left of the frame, checking the street from the angle that keeps him invisible from below. "Car's clean," he says. "Nothing in the last hour." "Uses people," Dorian says. "He doesn't come himself." He sends someone to watch and someone to report and someone else entirely to act, and by the time you figure out which one is which, the picture's already finished. He looks at Arlo. He sent that text to make you panic, to make you move again. Every time you move, you leave a trail. Arlo reaches for his notepad. He writes, "Then we don't move." Dorian reads it. For the first time since the trunk, the corners of his mouth move in a way that is not cold at all. It is brief, it is controlled, and it is real, and Arlo catches it before it closes. Then we don't move, Dorian says like an agreement. They stay. And in the staying, something shifts between the 5 walls of Devonte's quiet house in Bloomfield. Something that is not dramatic, that does not announce itself, that does not arrive with the ceremony that large things sometimes pretend to need. It just settles in, the way mornings settle in, the way a familiar song settles in, the way the specific weight of a person becomes familiar once you have been around them long enough that their absence would leave a shape. It is Selim who starts it, and he starts it the way he does everything, directly without performance, as if hesitation is a thing that happens to other people. He sits across from Arlo at the kitchen table on the 5th evening, and he slides a single piece of paper across the surface between them. He uses paper instead of the notepad because this one he prepared. The words are not rushed. They are written in a clean, careful hand. We want you to be ours, not because of obligation, not because we owe you for the trunk and the first aid and the borrowed house, not because fate drew some line between us that we have no choice in. Because every hour we have been in your space, we have been learning what we missed when we were 17 and too wrapped up in being what everyone needed us to be to notice a boy sitting alone at a water fountain with a book and more patience and more strength than anyone in that building combined. We see you now, all 3 of us, and we are asking. Arlo reads it once. He reads it a second time at the same pace, not because he missed something, but because the second read is not for information, it is for the weight. For the specific gravity of being asked, genuinely asked, by 3 people who have never in their lives had to ask for anything. He gets up. He goes to the window and stands there with his back to the table, and he looks out at the Bloomfield evening, the slow orange fade of the street lamp coming on at the corner, the neighbor's sprinkler making its automatic pass over the front lawn, a kid on a bicycle making a wide lazy arc at the end of the block. His apartment in Montclair has a street lamp outside the window too. Different street, same flicker. He has stood at that window hundreds of times in the last 2 years and looked at that lamp and felt the specific texture of a life that is quietly, steadily okay. Not extraordinary, not filled, just okay. And for a long time that was enough, because enough was what he allowed himself to want. He does not know when he stopped allowing himself more than that. He is not sure it was a decision so much as an accumulation. Every time communication cost him more than it cost the person on the other side. Every time someone looked at him and saw the silence before they saw the person inside it. Every time a room went awkward at the exact moment he needed it to stay easy. Eventually the math of it added up to a life that was safe precisely because it was small. He picks up the pen from the table without turning around. He writes on the paper below Selim's words. He turns and slides it back to him. Why me? Selim reads it. He passes it to Zayn, who has come to the doorway from the hall. Zayn reads it and passes it to Dorian, who has come to stand behind Selim's chair. Dorian reads it and sets it flat on the table. There is a pause that is exactly long enough to be honest, and then Zayn picks up the pen. He writes one sentence. He does not look at his brothers before he writes it. He just writes it the way a person says the true thing when they are done waiting for a better moment to arrive. He slides the paper back to Arlo, because you stayed. That night on Route 22, when every reasonable, self-preserving instinct in a human body would have closed that trunk and driven away and never looked back, you stayed. Not because you knew us, not because you owed us, because it was right and you knew it was right and that was enough for you. It has always been enough for you. That is the rarest thing we have ever seen. Arlo stands with the paper in both hands and the kitchen is completely quiet, and the street lamp outside is doing its slow flicker, and something in his chest is doing what it does when a door he forgot was there opens inward. He is about to write back. The front door takes a hit, not a knock, not a ring. A hit, one hard impact, the sharp crack of something thrown into the wood with weight behind it, and then a second one before the sound of the first has fully cleared the room. Then silence, then the handle moves. Selim is on his feet. Zayn is already in the hallway. Dorian moves to the far wall and puts himself between the door and the interior of the house, and his eyes go flat and operational in a single second. And this clean immediate shift from person to something older and colder and built entirely for this, is the version of them that Arlo has never seen up close. The door opens on the third hit, 2 men, not Nolan. Sent, like Dorian said they would be, thick-necked, moving like they were told to move and not like they want to, which means they are employees and not believers, which means they have a ceiling. The first one clears the doorframe and Selim takes him before he reaches the entry rug. 3 movements, close and efficient, a redirection and a leverage and a controlled drop that puts the man's knees on the hardwood without Selim raising his voice or his blood pressure visibly. The second man gets 2 steps into the hall before Zayn comes off the staircase wall with his entire body weight, and the man's back hits the wall and his chin hits the bottom of Zayn's forearm, and the fight is over before it ever became one. Dorian walks to the first man on the floor and crouches and goes through his jacket pockets. He stands with a phone in his hand. He reads what is on it for 15 seconds. His gold eyes go flat. Not cold, flat. The difference is temperature. Cold is a reaction. Flat is what comes after the reaction has fully processed and landed and been filed, and what comes out on the other side is not feeling but decision. Arlo, he says, and the way he says the name is different from any time he has said it before. It has weight now. The specific weight of a man who is about to say something that reorders things. Arlo looks at him. Nolan does not want us, Dorian says. He wants you. He turns the phone screen toward Arlo across the room, and even at the distance the message is readable. Find the Omega. Leave the Kings. He's the only witness. The sprinkler outside completes its pass. The kid on the bicycle is long gone. The hallway is silent except for the soft, involuntary breathing of two men on the floor who are not getting up yet. And Arlo stands in the kitchen with the piece of paper still in his hands, the paper with Zane's sentence on it, and understands, with total and immediate clarity, that his life just became very different from the life it was an hour ago. Dorian sets the phone on the kitchen counter and does not look at it again, the way you set something down when you are done with its information and have moved into the next phase of what to do about it. Selim has the first man zip-tied. There are zip ties in the junk drawer. There always are in houses where someone practical lives. And Zane has the second one against the far wall of the hallway with his wrists secured to the stair rail. And both men are cooperative in the way that men become cooperative when the alternative has already been demonstrated to them calmly and without explanation. Selim comes back into the kitchen and looks at Arlo. Not past him. At him. The way he always looks at Arlo, like Arlo is the primary object in the room and everything else is peripheral. Witness to what, he says. Not to his brothers, to Arlo. And here is the thing about being mute in a moment like this. There is no stalling, no filler words. No way to fill the air with sound while you gather yourself. You either write the truth or you do not, and the absence of the truth is its own answer. Arlo knows this. He has always known this. Silence can lie just as clearly as words. He picks up the pen. I was doing a delivery run 6 months ago. Late night route, extra shift, a building on Commerce Street in Newark. I went into the parking garage to find the freight entrance. There was a man in the garage. He did not see me because I came in from the stairwell side. He was standing over something on the ground. I did not understand what I was looking at. I left. I told myself it was nothing. He pauses. He writes the next line smaller, like something he has been pressing down for half a year. 2 weeks later I saw your father's face on the news. I recognized the building. I did not fully recognize the man I saw in the garage until tonight. Selim takes the notepad. He reads it. He sets it on the counter and puts both hands flat beside it and looks at the wall above the backsplash. Not blankly, not emptily, but with the specific focus of a man running a timeline in his head, pulling dates and locations and connecting them to the story. He has been living for 6 months from the wrong side. Zane comes in from the hallway and reads over Selim's shoulder, and when he gets to the last sentence, he goes very still in the way he only goes still when still is the only honest response available. Dorian is the one who speaks. You have been carrying that for 6 months, he says. His voice is not accusatory. It is not angry. It is something that sounds underneath its controlled surface like grief, the specific grief of someone who understands what it means to carry a weight you were not handed by choice. Alone, Arlo looks at him. He picks up the pen. He writes, I did not know what I had seen. I still did not know until 20 minutes ago. That is the truth. I know, Dorian says, and he does. Arlo can see that he does. Dorian, of all of them, is the one who understands the mechanism of carrying something heavy without knowing what it is called. He has been doing it since he was 12 years old and found out there was a half-brother who wanted them gone and a father who refused to choose. And Dorian spent the next 14 years learning to live in the uncertainty of that. He crosses to Arlo and he picks up the piece of paper, not the notepad, the piece of paper, the one with his brother's handwriting and Zane's sentence at the bottom, and he holds it up to Arlo without speaking. A question without words, which is how you communicate with someone who has had to teach the world to meet him that way. Arlo looks at the paper. At Zane's sentence, because you stayed. He looks up at Dorian. Dorian puts the paper back on the table. We are not putting you in a car and shipping you somewhere to handle this without you, Dorian says. Selim is going to ask you what you want to do. When he asks, the answer matters. We will follow it. He pauses and there is nothing performative about the pause, no drama, no lean into it, just the truth of it, stated plainly and set down. You have as much claim to how this ends as any of us do. The hallway, Selim says, without coming back into the kitchen, his voice carrying from exactly where he is. What do you want, Arlo? The second man against the stair rail shifts and says nothing. The zip ties hold. Arlo picks up the pen. I want it to be over. He holds the notepad up without moving from the spot he is standing in. The kitchen holds all of that for exactly 1 beat. Then Selim comes back in and sits down and says, then let's finish it. And Nolan's phone, still on the counter, still lit, still full of messages that are about to become evidence, buzzes once. Dorian picks it up. His jaw sets. He turns the screen so Selim and Zane can see it. Selim reads it and then looks at Arlo, and in his expression is the thing that arrives on a person's face just before the ground they were standing on becomes the ground they are running on. Nolan is at the parking garage, he says. Commerce Street. He went back to the scene. A pause. Tonight, Commerce Street at 11 at night is the kind of dark that cities make when they are not paying attention to a specific block. The heavy industrial dark of a street between two things that matter, a place where light goes only when it is going somewhere else. The parking garage is 6 stories and poured concrete, and the kind of building that absorbs everything, sound, heat, event, and keeps it without record. Selim parks a block south. Nobody argues about whether Arlo stays in the car. Nobody offers it as an option, not because they are not thinking of his safety, the opposite, exactly the opposite, but because Arlo already wrote "I want it to be over," and none of them have the right to redefine what that means for him. They walk to the garage entrance together, all 4 of them, and the night accepts them without comment. The freight stairwell is where Arlo said it was. Third door on the left from the exterior wall. No camera on the interior of the stairwell, because the camera was broken when the garage was built, and the building management has been disputing the repair cost ever since. Arlo knows this because he used this entrance every time on his delivery route, every Thursday, 2 months running, and the knowledge of it is in his body the same way the knowledge of his apartment layout is in his body, unconscious and precise. He leads. That part is not discussed either. He just goes first at the stairwell door and Selim falls to his left shoulder and Zayn moves to his right and Dorian takes the rear, and the 4 of them go up the stairwell in the specific quiet of people who have all, for different reasons, learned that silence is a tool and not a deficit. 2nd level. 3rd, 4th. On the 4th level Arlo stops. He puts his hand flat on the stairwell door. He turns and looks at Selim and holds up the notepad which he has been carrying because he knew he would need it, and he has already written the next thing, the corner where he was standing. Bay 4C, far northwest, the column with the crack at the base. There is something there. I saw him crouching at the base of that column. I didn't understand it at the time. Selim reads it. He passes it without sound. Zayn reads and passes. Dorian reads and his expression does something exact and sharp, the face of a man who just connected a wire that has been sitting disconnected for 6 months. Will, Dorian says under his breath, to himself, not to the room, but the room hears it. He pulled the original copy before the attorneys could document the revision. We thought it was lost in the estate process. We thought. He stops. He sets his jaw. He looks at the door. Selim puts one hand briefly on Dorian's shoulder. The contact is 3 seconds long and says everything that 3 seconds between brothers, who have never been easy with sentiment, can say. Then Selim pushes the door open. Bay 4C, Nolan Voss is crouched at the base of the cracked column with a small flat case open on the ground beside him, and the thing he has just pulled from the sealed cavity in the concrete base. An envelope, plastic wrapped, the kind of waterproofing you do when you plan to leave something somewhere for a long time, is in his hands, and he is standing and turning before the sound of the door fully reaches him, and when he sees them his face does 3 separate things in under 2 seconds. He is 23, younger than Arlo expected, younger than the version of him that has been living in Arlo's head as a threat since the text messages. He has Dorian's jaw and none of Dorian's control. His eyes find his 3 brothers and he calculates, and then his eyes find Arlo and the calculation changes, becomes something more specific. Maury afraid, because Arlo is the variable he was not prepared for. You brought him here, Nolan says. He is not talking to the kings. He is talking about Arlo, to the space in front of him, to the failing math of a plan that has just run out of margins. You actually brought him here. You asked us to give him up, Selim says. His voice is level, the way the surface of deep water is level, the actual depth invisible from above. We didn't think that was something you deserved. Nolan's grip tightens on the envelope. He doesn't know what he saw. Knows exactly what he saw, Zayn says. He knew at the moment Dorian named you. It was an accident. Nolan says it fast. Too fast, the way the truth's opposite always arrives, dressed in urgency, leaning too hard on the word it needs you to believe. He was changing the will. He was going to cut me out entirely. You don't know what he said to me that night. Stop, Dorian says, and Nolan stops. Not because Dorian's voice is loud, it is not, because it has a quality in it that is worse than loud. The quality of a door closing on something permanently. You put us in a trunk, Dorian says, each word its own sentence, its own weight. You left us on a highway like cargo. Whatever our father said to you that night, there is not a version of that story where the trunk was the answer. He looks at his half-brother across the 12 feet of concrete between them. Give me the envelope. Nolan looks at it. He looks at Arlo. He has to sign something, Nolan says. His voice has changed. The calculation is gone, and what is underneath it is something much younger. A 23-year-old who started something he could not finish and has now run out of road. If he signs something saying he didn't see anything, he's not signing anything, all 3 kings say. Not in unison, one after the other. Barely a breath between them. Nolan looks at Arlo one more time. Arlo holds his gaze. He does not look away. He is not afraid. He has been afraid for 6 months of something he could not name, and now that it has a name and a face and a cracked concrete column at Bay 4C, the fear has become something different, something cleaner, something you can stand up straight inside. He pulls out his notepad. He writes one sentence. He holds it up toward Nolan. It's already over. Nolan reads it. His shoulders drop half an inch. It is the drop of a man whose legs have given out before his pride has agreed to let them. He holds out the envelope. Dorian takes it. They are back in Selim's car on the bridge back into the city by 1 a.m., and the bridge is clear, and the skyline is doing what it always does at this hour, holding its lights up against the dark with the specific, unasked patience of a city that does not require anyone to be watching it to go on being itself. Nobody speaks for the first 4 minutes, not out of tension. Out of the particular quality of silence that follows the end of something that was very large for a very long time. The kind of quiet that is not empty but full of everything that just happened and everything that is now. For the first time, not in the way anymore. Dorian is in the passenger seat, and the envelope is in his hands, both of them, and he has not opened it yet. He is not ready to open it yet, and nobody is asking him to be. Zayn is behind him, head tilted back against the seat, eyes on the ceiling of the car, tapping his knee twice with 2 fingers in a slow, steady rhythm that he does not try to stop. Arlo is behind Selim. Selim drives. He drives the way he does everything, steady, focused, without unnecessary movement. The kind of person who does not make more effort than the situation requires, because he is always saving some measure of himself for what comes next. His hands are relaxed on the wheel, and his eyes are on the road, and once, just once, he looks in the rearview mirror. And when he does, his eyes go directly to Arlo, not to the road behind them. And Arlo is already looking at the mirror from his side, and they look at each other in that rectangle of reflected light for exactly as long as it takes the bridge to deliver them to the other bank. Arlo opens his journal. He has had it in his jacket pocket since they left Bloomfield, took it without fully knowing why, the way you take the thing that carries your weight with you when you go somewhere heavy. He opens it to a fresh page and he writes. He writes slowly, not because he is uncertain, but because the sentence is one he has been constructing without knowing it for the last 5 days, and getting it right matters. He finishes. He holds the journal up over the headrest in front of him, so that both Selim in the driver's seat and Dorian in the passenger seat can read it at the same time. Then he tilts it toward the window so the light from the bridge lamps catches the page. I am not afraid anymore. Dorian reads it first. He turns just far enough to see the page and then turns back to the windshield. His chin drops slightly, the movement of a man who just felt something travel through him that he was not entirely ready for, and the corner of his mouth moves in a way that has nothing cold in it at all. Like the receipt in his wallet, like birthday with a small star drawn beside it. Real and kept and private until it isn't, he laughs. It is not the controlled, short sound of a man performing ease. It is genuine, soft and brief, and startled out of him by something he did not see coming, and it fills the car with a quality of warmth that Arlo does not have a word for, except that it is the exact opposite of the gold eyes that looked at him in the trunk 8 days ago. Zayn leans forward from the back seat and reads the journal over Arlo's shoulder, and then he sits back with a sound that is almost a laugh but lands more like relief. The exhale of a man who has been holding his breath longer than he knew. Selim does not laugh. He keeps his eyes on the road, but his right hand comes off the wheel, easy and unhurried, and he holds it open on the center console, palm up, the way you hold a hand out when you are not asking but you are making yourself available to be answered. He does not look in the mirror again. He looks straight ahead at the road that is taking them forward, and he holds his hand open, and he waits. Arlo looks at it. He looks at the hand, the scar on the inside of the wrist from something that happened a long time ago. The knuckle that healed crooked, the palm that is simply open, asking nothing, offering itself as a starting point. And he thinks about the water fountain at 15, and the notebook dropped in the stairwell, and Route 22 at 1:47 in the morning, and the trunk, and the chipped coffee mug lined up against 3 new ones on a shelf that used to hold only one. Thinks about the sentence Zayn wrote, because you stayed. Arlo puts his hand in Selim's. Selim's fingers close around it, not tight, not possessive, present. The way you hold something you have been careful with from the beginning. The way you hold something you plan to keep being careful with. Dorian looks out the passenger window at the river below the bridge, and from the angle where Arlo is sitting, he can see the reflection of the water in Dorian's eyes, and he can see that Dorian is smiling. They drive. The city opens in front of them, all light and motion, and the low continuous sound of a million people living their lives without knowledge of what just ended on a parking garage floor in Newark. And the 4 of them move through it together, and the night does not feel like it is pressing in anymore. It feels like it is making room. The evidence in Dorian's envelope goes to the right people 8 days later. A federal prosecutor who has been building a case against a pattern of financial interference in the Voss estate for the better part of a year, and who takes one look at the revised will and the time-stamped documents inside the plastic wrapping, and makes a phone call that Nolan receives before he has finished his morning coffee. Nolan does not fight it. Arlo is not sure he was ever really a fighter, a schemer, yes, a planner, a person who set things in motion from a distance and let other people absorb the contact. When the option to maneuver disappears, he has very little underneath it. 2 weeks after the bridge, a Thursday morning, Arlo is back at the free clinic near Branch Brook Park for the first time in 8 months. He sits in the plastic chair in the waiting area and watches the door and thinks about how different the city looks when you are not afraid of something in it. Then he goes in and does the work. He is good at it. He has always been good at it. You do not need a voice to be good at most of the things that matter. He gets home at 5. All 3 of them are in his apartment. He stops in the doorway. Selim is reading on the couch. Zain is in the kitchen, which means there is food being made, which means Zain has discovered that cooking is a form of rhythm and has taken to it with the same intensity he takes to everything that gives him a pattern to follow. Dorian is at the table with his receipts spread flat in front of him, organizing them, and there is a new one at the front of the stack, today's date, a diner 3 blocks over, and in the margin, in Selim's handwriting, one word, home. Arlo stands in the doorway and looks at his apartment with all of them in it, and feels the specific texture of a life that is, for the first time in a very long time, not just okay. He takes off his jacket. He hangs it on the hook by the door. He goes to the kitchen and stands next to Zain and picks up the second wooden spoon. And he does not need to say anything because Zain is already tapping a rhythm on the counter with his free hand, and without discussion Arlo picks up the rhythm on the pot handle with his spoon. And Zain grins, fast and wide and completely unguarded, the best version of a grin, the kind that arrives before the person has decided to let it, from the living room. Selim says without looking up from his book, "Don't burn it." Zain says, "We're not burning it." Dorian says from the table, "You're both burning it." Arlo takes over the pot. Nobody burns it. 3 weeks after the bridge, Arlo's apartment, 8 in the morning, soft light. The kind that comes in through east-facing windows on a clear morning and does not rush itself, low and honey-warm, landing in long flat rectangles across the kitchen floor, finding the dust in the air and making it visible and somehow making even that look intentional. The chipped blue mug is on the shelf where it always is. Beside it, lined up in a patient row, a green one, a clay-colored one, and a white one with a small chip on the handle rim that happened on a Tuesday when Dorian set it down with more force than he intended, and looked at it afterward with an expression that said he found the imperfection acceptable. 4 mugs, 4 people. A shelf that used to hold 1 life and has quietly, without ceremony, made room for 4. The marking happens that morning. There is no ritual, no ceremony. No moment that announces itself as the moment. It arrives the way the truest things arrive, out of quiet, out of choice, out of 3 separate people who have been asking the same question in different languages and one person who has finally decided that his own answer is worth giving. Arlo sits at the kitchen table with his coffee and his journal open to the last page. He has been writing. He does that here in the margins of mornings, before the day takes the quiet away from him. It is the only kind of voice he has, and he has stopped thinking of it as a lesser kind. Selim sits across from him with a cup and no book, which means he came to the table for the company and not for anything to do, and Arlo knows this and does not look up from the journal, but shifts his foot under the table so that the side of it rests against Selim's shoe. A small thing, chosen. Zain comes in from the hallway and fills his mug and leans against the counter with both hands wrapped around it and watches the morning come in through the window. He is not tapping today. He does not always need to now. Something in him has found the quiet and found it livable, and Arlo knows that is not nothing, that is enormous, that is the kind of change that does not announce itself but reshapes a person from the inside, and Arlo is glad to have been in the room while it happened. Dorian comes last. He pulls out the chair to Arlo's left and sits. He has the green mug. He chose it himself, 3rd day in Bloomfield, from a cabinet full of options, and he picked the green one without hesitation, the way a person picks the thing they were going to pick all along. He sets his mug on the table. He looks at the journal in front of Arlo. He looks at Arlo. "Are you writing about us?" he says. Not a question, not an accusation. The tone of a man who hopes the answer is yes. Arlo looks up. Slides the journal across the table. Dorian reads the open page. Then he passes it to Zain, who has come to lean against the counter behind the table. Zain reads it and makes a sound low in his throat and passes it to Selim. Selim reads it and is quiet for a long time. Then he slides the journal back on the last page, in Arlo's handwriting, in the small careful hand that has been his only voice for as long as he can remember. "They thought I saved them from a trunk on Route 22. They have no idea I was the one who needed finding. I had been sitting at the edge of my own life for years, holding the door open for other people, not understanding that the door was mine too. They walked through it, all 3 of them, and they brought everything with them. The noise and the weight and the complexity and the warmth. They made my apartment loud without making a sound. They made my shelf look full. They made mornings feel like something worth being early for. I don't have a word for what this is that feels big enough, but I have a journal, and I have time, and I have 4 mugs on a shelf in the morning light. That is enough to start." Selim closes the journal gently, covers it with his hand the way you cover something you want to protect, and looks at Arlo across the small kitchen table with the honey light coming in, and everything he does not say says everything. Arlo reaches up. His fingers find the side of Selim's neck, where the marking will go, where the warmth of the alpha bond sits just under the surface, And in the quiet of the morning, with Zane standing at the counter and Dorian sitting at his left and the city beginning its low daily hum outside the window, Arlo makes his choice, not out of rescue, not out of debt, not out of the ancient biology of Alpha and Omega that older stories would make the whole point of. Out of the same thing that kept him at that trunk on Route 22 at 1:47 in the morning, when every reasonable thing in him said to drive away. It was right. It was right, and he knew it, and that has always been enough for him. It is enough now. The light comes in through the east-facing window and lands across the table, and the 4 mugs on the shelf catch it, all of them, and hold it. The morning does not rush. The apartment is warm. Outside, the telephone wire above the alley is empty today. The bird is somewhere else, and that is fine, because some things stay and some things go, and the ones that stay do so by choice. And Arlo has never known the word for what that means to a person who spent a long time wondering if he was the kind of thing that got stayed for. He knows now. The journal stays open on the table, and the last line sits there in the light, unhurried, unashamed, taking up exactly as much space as it deserves. That is enough to start. If this story moved something in you, if Arlo's quiet, steady, impossible courage made you feel seen in some way, if the Kings made you believe that the people worth having are the ones who show up and learn how to be still, drop a comment below and tell us which moment in this story hit you the hardest. Was it the trunk on Route 22? Was it Selim's hand open on the console of the bridge? Was it the journal? Tell us. Your comment might be exactly what someone else in this community needed to read today. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so you do not miss a single story. Every week we bring you something that is built to make you feel something real, stories about love that earns itself, about people who stay when it would have been easier to go, about the quiet ones who turn out to be the strongest ones in the room. Hit the notification bell. Share this with one person who needs to hear a story like Arlo's right now, and we will see you in the next one.